Welcome to The Joyful Frugalista, the podcast that's all about living a richer life with less. I'm your host, Serina Bird, author and passionate frugalista. Each episode, we dive into inspiring stories, practical tips and joyful conversations that help you create abundance, embrace mindful spending, and live your best life, all without breaking the bank. So grab a cuppa, get comfy, and let's explore how being a frugalista can lead to freedom, happiness, and a whole lot of joy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions. Hello, frugalistas, and welcome to today's episode. Today I have a special guest, and of course, all of my guests are special. Today we are going to talk about one of my favourite topics, and that is fashion. But not just fashion, frugal fashion. Emma Edwards is a writer, content creator, podcaster, financial behaviour educator, and a self-described former hot money mess. Those, by the way, are her words, not my words, but I loved it. Who has found a passion for the softer skills of money while on her own pursuit of financial confidence. She's author of The Wardrobe Project, A Year of Buying Less and Liking Yourself More, which you can see here. And I'm already, we've both got, and I'm even matchy. Look at that.
I'm impressed. I'm matchy on the nails and the glasses.
On the nails and the glasses. Fabulous. Loving the book. It's fabulous. You need to read it. It'll change how your perspective on fashion. And she's also founder of The Broke Generation. So to relate to what she's writing about, back in 2014, I spent a whole year not buying any new clothes, something I wrote about in my first book, The Joyful Frugalista. Now, I'd like to think that that makes me very virtuous, but what then happened is at the end of that year, towards the end, I separated from my ex-husband, and then every time we had icky court or other things, I would go op shopping or thrifting, as it's now become popularly known. And that created its own problem because clothing became then a prop for my self-esteem. Realizing this was a problem, actually more the bling and the jewelry than the clothing, but still a problem, I decided not to buy anything for a year. So I did it a bit on the light spectrum because I still bought things for my kids and I still bought essential things, but I really wanted to find a way to cut that circuit breaking about going to the op shop. Emma, is this something you can relate to?
Absolutely. I'm so excited to talk to you about this. I can't think of anybody better to talk about this book with than you. Very impressed that you did the complete no buy. I might end up interviewing you actually about that as we go, because a lot of people said to me, why just clothes? Why not everything? And I kind of thought, well, hang on, steady on. Let's start with clothes.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, it was the clothes were the very specific. It was kind of the only part of my spending that was really still emotional. I'd done so much work on my spending, but the clothes were just this kind of league of their own. So that's kind of why I focused on that. But I have been flirting with the idea of doing a complete no buy at some stage of all discretionary items.
Yes, but let's focus on the clothes. And as
Yes.
you talked about this emotional nexus with the clothes. So clothing is a very emotional thing, especially for women, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. For me in particular, clothes were always very deeply linked to my body image and my sense of self-worth and self-esteem, which I'd struggled with for a really long time. A lot of women will relate to having been on a diet since they were about 9. And that was my experience. I'd always been a bit bigger than the other kids at school. And I was really aware of that because of society in the 90s and early 2000s, because of, things like being in adult clothes sooner than other kids are. Back when I was growing up, I remember there were like teen ranges in a lot of stores.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really seem to have that anymore. Kids seem to be dressed, like they're going to their corporate job as soon as they're about 14. But you used to kind of have ranges that were I remember there was one store and it had a range called 915 and it was from age 9 to 15. And I remember when I was maybe 12 or 13, I think my mum said, I think you better we better have a look at the ladies section so that you can get something. And she goes, this is a size 12. And that's sort of about what you'll be, because, some of the age 15 stuff is not fitting that well. I was tall as well, which also didn't help. I'd just been very aware of the way clothes were able to patch up parts of my identity I didn't like very much, or parts of my image that I didn't like very much, or going back to old TV shows like What Not to Wear, I was all those rules were really deeply baked into me.
Oh, those rules, the whole thing where they go and tell people how terrible they look.
And they were very of the time, those shows, but I was very aware that you've got big legs, so don't wear that. And, my kind of view of looking good in my clothes really came down to the degree to which those clothes were quote unquote flattering. I can remember trying clothes on in a dressing room and not liking the item that much, but thinking about buying it because it made me look thinner. And I've definitely bought things solely because they made me look thinner, or liking an item but not buying it because it wasn't flattering, or it made me look too wide, or, oh no, curvy girls don't wear horizontal stripes, and all those kinds of things.
The horizontal stripes. Honestly, I love horizontal stripes, and they're sort of having a bit of a comeback. But do they really look flattering on anybody, and does it matter?
Well, it's funny, like those rules that get baked in, I think about it now and I'm thinking, I don't think I've ever thought, God, she looks bigger today because she's in horizontal stripes. It's just a bit like one of those. Do you remember the old rule that the camera adds 10 pounds? Do you remember that?
Yes.
I think about that now and I'm like, oh, do I come across bigger online? Like how there's so many things that we internalize from those narratives, and all of that really fueled my clothing consumption and the way that I bought clothes. And, COVID really threw a lot of that into question, because particularly here in Victoria, in Melbourne, we were in lockdown for a bit longer than everyone else. And so
a lot longer than everyone else.
a lot longer than everyone else. And so, a lot of women during that time bought clothes online, even though we had nowhere to go. A lot of people's bodies changed during that time because we weren't living our normal lives. We were sitting at home and throwing down a cheese board every weekend with a couple of bottles of red wine. And I found myself again slipping back into a lot of old habits with clothes buying, because I was feeling a certain way about my confidence coming out of lockdown. I was going back to a job that was really not great for my mental health. I felt very isolated there. I didn't feel confident there. And the way that I presented in my outfits kind of became an emotional crutch for that. And so I would buy things to wear and then have this really strong emotional high at the time, because I'm buying into this better version of myself, this ideal, I call it my fantasy self, and then that sort of would wear off after a while. And I sort of started to realize that even like no matter how much I bought, I never felt like I had anything I really wanted to wear, and I relied solely on novelty to enjoy clothes and feel good in what I was wearing, as though every time was sort of like another go on the emotional slot machine of, will this make me feel like I look good? And yeah, so 2022 was when I started thinking about, what if I just didn't buy anything at all for a year? And I thought it would be a fun savings challenge, and I thought that it would be, there'd be a beneficial environmental footprint through not consuming, but it turned into kind of a whole emotional, dare I say, journey.
Well, there's a lot to discuss about this, but I want to go back to those COVID years and, what you're describing with that. I've heard it termed revenge spending. So people can't go out, they can't go on their European vacation, they can't go and do the things they normally did, they can't go to the gym. So they'd buy things online to make themselves feel better. So it was a thing, wasn't it? And as you described, you're buying clothes that you can't even go out to a function and wear. It's not like you're going to wear a cocktail dress at home.
Exactly.
Well, you could if you wanted, but
it wouldn't be very comfortable. Yeah, it was a big thing for people, and like a lot of retailers reported that their revenue went up during that time, because
crazy.
Surprisingly, people were buying clothes. And I write in the book about my father-in-law, who was a postie for Australia Post during COVID, the early days of COVID. And he would kind of say, I don't know if I should really be doing this job. Why am I, back when we didn't know, quite just how the severity of what COVID would be like, and there were a lot of question marks, he kind of said, I don't really know if I want to potentially risk my life or my well-being to deliver cookie returns, because that's what they're all the packages he was taking, clothes packages.
They're
and
not
I was
like
wow,
essential things. They're not like food.
No.
They're not like medicine.
No, it was a lot of like retail products. That, yes, of course, I'm sure there was a utilitarian aspect to some of it, but I think I can definitely admit that what I was buying wasn't necessary, really, but it provided that emotional, that hit of dopamine. And then on a deeper level, when it's clothes, there can be a real identity piece as well. During lockdown, I turned 30, and so I'd had a lot of ideas of, what I wanted to feel like when I was 30, and the maybe party I was going to throw, and who I wanted to be, and what I'd be doing. And sort of going into lockdown 29 and coming out age 31, everybody's, lost certain years to COVID. But for me, my experience was definitely around that age piece and wanting to really present myself, almost using clothes as a way to shortcut the feelings I wasn't having about where I was at. And a lot of people say to you, oh, your 30s are so much better than your 20s. You don't care what anyone else thinks. You're so much more confident. And I wasn't feeling that. So I tried to buy that instead. I tried to buy this, I'm out of lockdown and this is me. And I'm feeling this confidence about myself. And yeah, my 30s are better than my 20s. And I have got so much more figured out when I didn't. But I was trying to buy anything that made me feel like I did.
There's something about 30 and women, like it's, and I know, and it's a while ago now. In fact, it's 23 years ago since I turned 30, but I still remember feeling like almost depressed. Like I had a house and I had a job and I was studying, but I wasn't married yet and I didn't have kids. And it's this sort of really weird unspoken pressure that women put on themselves, that they need to be, I don't know, career successful, got the ring on the finger, even though I'm not sure that I really agree with that in terms of for various reasons, being a frugalista, the kids, the whole package. And I don't know many women who actually have that at age 30, if at all. But yeah, it's a weird thing, isn't it?
It's a weird thing. It's, as you say, it's pressure we put on ourselves, but there's also still so much external pressure, even seemingly innocent things like 30 under 30 lists. I've had friends that have made the Forbes 30 under 30, and there was kind of a moment where I was like, whoa, I'm past that. I can never have that. And it's not something I ever thought about wanting or anything, but there's something distinctive about when you realize, wow, that's an achievement that I can never have. We're very lucky in modern life now that there are so many, you can do lots of things at lots of ages. A lot of people talk about how they wrote their first book when they were 50, or how they started their business in retirement or something like that. But yeah, there's certain things that you do, I guess, grieve when you go past 30. Not just comical things like 30 under 30, but yeah, it's and it's also, it's what you've left behind, but it's also sort of that piece I was saying about the pressure to feel a certain way about your 30s, that your 30s are so much better. Yeah, they are so much better, but it doesn't mean that everything will get better when you are 30 and one day old. Like, I'm 34 now, and I can absolutely see what people mean now. Your 30s are so much better than your 20s. You don't second guess things as much. You do care what people think less. But it doesn't mean that overnight all of your problems will go away, and it shouldn't have to mean that either.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we need to have more conversations too about, real women and real pathways, and things not being a race to the finish.
Yeah, absolutely. And things being really gradual. Social media makes everything look like it happens overnight, and transformations are just happening left and right. But every change I've made in my life, whether it was sorting my finances out, getting good with money, changing my confidence, getting over my body image insecurities, none of those things have been the flip of a switch. None of those things have been instant things. It is subtle, tiny changes. You don't wake up one day and realize that it's happened. There are very subtle signs, and then you start to go, or it's also very similar to coming out of depression and anxiety periods. You don't wake up one day and go, oh, I'm better. Just very gradually you start to go, oh, I'm not feeling like that about that anymore. Oh, I've had a few good days in a row. Oh, I've, had a couple of paydays where I haven't spent all of my money. It's very subtle changes, and we often claw for these big crescendo transformations because that's what's depicted in media and movies and things, and that's what the female experience is supposed to be like. We're supposed to be like, Andy Sachs in The Devil Wears Prada, walking into the office and everyone looking at how worthy she is now that she's had a makeover. But
the instant makeover. That was another thing that was really big in the 90s, wasn't it? All these instant makeover shows. What was it? Queer Eye for the Straight Guy.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
There was, What Not to Wear. And there was another one similar to that. A Gok Wan one, I think, and he did one. It was I didn't realize how much I'd internalized that sort of like flipping of a switch and everything being okay, until I started working on my finances, interestingly. And that's when I started to realize that I was waiting for this big moment where I wouldn't be insecure anymore and I wouldn't be hot financial mess anymore. But it doesn't really work like that. And same with the wardrobe project. I never expected giving up buying clothes for a year to have any bearing on my body image. That wasn't what I went into it for. I went into it for a challenge and to save a bit of money. But again, very gradually, I started to realize that I wasn't zooming in on my flaws anymore. I wasn't comparing myself to the picture online. I wasn't going, oh, that would look nice on me, but I'm too big. I was suddenly starting to see myself for who I really was. And that happened very, very slowly throughout the year. But I think it's a really interesting thing to think about, how consumption and the things that we buy and the way that we spend money is often a way of avoiding ourselves rather than, we think we're buying for ourselves, but we're actually avoiding who we are. And when we take all of that away, we spend a lot of time with ourselves outside of the noise, and there's a lot to be learned there.
Very deep. And very profound. And it's amazing, isn't it? It's like, you're taking that facade away of the new clothes facade and you're going, well, actually, who am I and how do I want to appear?
I'm a bit of a fair weather Swiftie. I don't mind a bit of Taylor Swift from time to time, and she's got a lyric in one of her Vault tracks from 1989, and it says, "From the outside, it looks like you're trying lives on." And when I was listening to that during the year, I was like, that's what I've been doing with clothes up until now. I've been trying on other people's identities, trying on other people's confidence, trying on other people's just ability to not give a shit. Like, I've been trying on all of these other identities and I've never actually sat with my own. And something I did throughout the year was I took pictures of outfits that I wore with clothes I already had. And if I liked something, I'd add it to this album so that I had a catalogue of images to look back for when I felt like I had nothing to wear. And while that was a practical pursuit of when you think you have nothing to wear, show yourself that you do, what it actually did was it meant that I became my own inspiration and my benchmark for what looked good became me. Yeah, like I'd never really looked at myself in the mirror before. Of course I had looked at myself in the mirror to get ready, but I'd never really looked at what I looked like and thought, how can I feel good as me without all of this, oh, well, that influencer from Instagram wears this, so I might have a bit of her and then a bit of her and a bit of her. It was, all I had was me and my clothes, and taking the currency out of the ways I was buying other people's identities just left me with only me and only what I had. And I never expected that to have any bearing on the way I saw myself. But by the end of the year, I was like, hang on a second, I'm the heaviest I've ever been, but I think I look the best I've ever looked. What's going on?
Were you happier? Was that the secret sauce?
So much happier. And I wasn't relying on those external hits to feel anything. And I think what was interesting is, at that time at the end of the year, I thought, oh, you look, maybe it's just a coincidence. I am, as they say, your 30s are better than 20s. Maybe it's just because I'm older now and maybe I'm just past that. But then when I went back out into the world where I could buy again, I started to see where some of those negative thoughts would come back in again, because you know what women's sizing is like. When we try clothes on, you can be any size on any given day and things just because it's your size doesn't mean it fits your body. And I kind of realized that when we buy clothes that aren't already ours, when we try on clothes that aren't ours, we're sort of putting our bodies on trial. And trial in terms of will it fit, will it not fit? Will it look the way that I think it's going to look in my head? Like I spent so much time in my head when I'm buying because I've got an idea of what it's going to be. And when I wasn't buying, it was so much more peaceful. There wasn't these decisions of, oh, does it fit the way I thought? Oh, is it a bit expensive? Oh, what fabric is it? Oh, do they have it in my size in stock? Or shall I go to the store? And, oh, it's only in store on the other side of town. Shall I go over there? Well, I could go there on Friday on the way home from work. All of that noise was just gone. And I had no idea how loud the noise of consumption, especially emotional consumption, is. And the peace and the fact that the decision was just made for me was one of the most enlightening parts, actually.
Wow. So it took all that time. It sounds like there was all this time that you were spending on this shopping that you kind of got back in a way.
Yeah, sort of time, more time to a degree, but more just mental capacity, I think. It's just much more simple to use what you have. There's such a simplicity and a quietness from using what you have, whether it's clothes or anything else. I'm sure you found the same when you weren't buying things in general. You weren't sort of, stopping at the op shop, and you weren't, assessing whether you needed another little trinket or piece of jewelry or something. I think that with so many options nowadays, there's just options for everything. There's 100,000 versions of everything. I bought a black bag recently, and I'd been thinking about it for ages. I've been looking for one, and it's really hard to look for what you want because there will be literally 900 others that you don't want along the way. And I think we make a lot of space for that in our brains because that's what the world is like now. There's a million of everything. But actually, when you just choose to use a much more finite pool of resources, it's much simpler.
Yeah, it is. And there was a time where I would have like one handbag. I'd use that until it virtually fall apart, and then I'd have another one. Now I find I've got multiple. I'm not quite sure how that's happened. And yet at the same time, my need for them has also diminished because of the mobile phones revolution. So I find that I don't actually need big handbags anymore, but I'm sort of still conditioned to them. And, an op shopper here. And I had an experience too with handbags recently where I bought one just before COVID. Actually, I bought two just before COVID. And because I wasn't using them so much, I was still using my good one. And both of the other ones that I bought, things have a finite life, and I'm sure you've experienced this too. And then I picked up these good ones that I'd been saving that I got from an op shop, and they'd all delaminated. They're all sort of falling apart and crumbling, and I was really sad. Like one was a Guess handbag, which I've been really looking forward to using, and it was like, ugh. Use it or lose it, right?
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, there's a lot to be said about using what you have and wearing the things I had. That was one of my greatest sources of joy during the year. I realized how little I was actually wearing my clothes. Even when I was buying previously, it's not that I was buying loads and loads and loads. Probably the same as you. It wasn't causing me financial distress. The money could have been better used for sure. But it's not that I had loads and loads of clothes. It's just that I didn't wear them. I would wear the same uninspiring outfits over and over again because I wasn't putting any effort into what I already had. All of my effort with my clothes was going into looking at new things. I wasn't spending that same dedication and time with what I had. So when I actually went to make outfits from my existing wardrobe, and I would get, I'd find myself a challenge of, I've got a wedding on that day, or I've got a work event and, can't buy anything new, so I've got to wear something that I've got. And it made me realize how we're sort of conditioned to think that style is really simple and that outfits are very simple and you can just buy the right combination of things and you will have outfits. But actually, spending time with what you have and experimenting and putting things together that you might not have put together before, and putting something on and going, that shape's not quite right, I need something a bit more boxy, and trying something else on and belting it or rolling the sleeve or even customizing it. I got back into sewing during the year. All of those things are actually where joy from clothing can come from. But we're so used to shortcutting to the pseudo joy that comes from buying that we never get the joy from wearing.
Yeah, once again, very deep. And I guess one of the fears a lot of people have, and certainly something I have, is that people might go, oh my goodness, she's worn that dress before. She wears it every week. There was an episode in The Simpsons years ago where she picks up this, I don't know if you remember it, she picks up this pink sort of almost Chanel-like suit from, some seconds store. This is Marge Simpson. And she meets some old friends from high school or something, and they think she's really wealthy, so they invite her around to do these social things with her. But that's the only outfit she has that's like that. And so this whole thing that they're making fun of her because she only has this one suit. And it's real, right? Like for a lot of women, we worry that people will think that we are just povo, we've only got the one outfit. But do people notice? Do people notice and go, look, Emma, she's not buying any new clothes. What's wrong with her?
No, I had this conversation with somebody a couple of days ago, actually. I was saying people can't remember what they had for dinner yesterday. They don't remember what you wore last time. But I have a section in the book about sort of loudly outfit repeating. And for me, outfit repeating has become sort of an artifact of how much I love certain pieces in my wardrobe. And I sort of say, rather than going, oh, I'm wearing this again, like, oh, and kind of having that societal shame loaded on top of it. One, you're right, nobody will remember. But two, even if you're worried that they might remember, or even if somebody does, the way I see it now is what a privilege it is to have something I love so much that I can't wait to wear again. What a privilege it is to have a wardrobe full of things that now, because I replaced some things in the year following the year, now I go to my wardrobe and I can't wait to wear things. When the season rolls around again, I know I'm looking forward to wearing my summer pieces from last summer, which I'd never had before. My book launch is coming up and I'm wearing something that I've already got because I don't have that compulsion to go and buy something new, and I'm looking forward to wearing that. And aside from it being completely apt that I'm going to be outfit repeating for my book launch about outfit repeating, I'm also what a joy it is, what a privilege it is to have a dress that I think I look so great in and that fits me so well and is my color and that speaks so much about everything that I love about myself, which, even, a hangover from the 90s, it sounds bad to say that you love yourself, but what a privilege it is to be seen in the same clothes. Like, what's wrong with that? I've really changed the way I think about outfit repeating, for sure.
I do think there has been a shift. I think there was shift probably about sort of 10 years ago. There started to be a shift towards making op shopping, or as it's now known, thrifting, more socially acceptable. Whereas for a long time, and I'm a long-term op shopper, I started op shopping in the early 90s when I was at university, and you just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
It was like this sense of shame still that you couldn't afford it. Like, you do it, but you just wouldn't talk about it. Like, and I go to these divey op shops. I used to live in Brisbane, in Fortitude Valley in Brisbane, and like, you just wouldn't share where you got things from. You just pretend they came from something else. But now I think we're starting to get to a phase where outfit repeating is less of the social stigma. And I think in a way it's because we see actually it happening in the English royal family. We see them doing it, and it's almost a sense that, I think when economic times are tough and when sustainability is an issue, it's showing that you're not being extravagant. I don't know. Would you agree or would you disagree?
I think potentially. I think as well, we're fighting for our lives out here in the economy. Like, people, I don't know about you, I'm not thinking about what anybody else is wearing. And I also think that somewhere along the line, the rule about not outfit repeating actually trickled down from, media personalities and celebrities, and nowadays you'd have influencers. I think that a lot of the rules were that sort of, it was a fashion faux pas to wear the same thing on the runway. I don't really know how we made it about what we wear to the doctors or what we wear to the work function, I'd love to know if it's ever been a big kind of point of contention for people in their everyday lives, or if we've just internalized that it's bad and it's been profitable for companies for us to think that. So we've just kind of run with it for so long. I'm not sure, because personally, yeah, I've definitely had the not wanting to wear the same thing twice, but less so because of what other people might think, more just because I'm bored of the item that I wore last time and I want to, have the hit of something new or something different for the next event. I haven't ever kind of been faced with criticism for it, but that might be maybe it was a bit more prominent in the 90s where I was still wearing school uniform or something. I'm not sure.
Well, hopefully you're still wearing the same school uniform every day,
Yes.
although I guess that's sort of summer and winter.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe that's just my experience, but I get asked that a lot about the outfit repeating, and it's never been something that I've been worried about other people thinking about. It's always been very me driven.
Which is good. But yeah, so hopefully this is a positive shift. We should be good in terms of decreasing the amount people buy, although Australia is still not very good on that front.
Yeah, it shocks me, those numbers. Because not so much that Australia's high, it shocks me that the UK is low. I don't know if somebody's underreporting there or how it's being worked out, because for me and a lot of people I speak to, the UK has quite a big shopping culture for young people. So, yeah, I'm not sure how I think the UK numbers are where Australia sits at 56, UK sits at 36 or 33 per person per year. That shocked me a little bit, but I'll have to dig into that a bit further.
So this is a number of items, or is it kilograms of textiles?
Items purchased per person, yeah.
That's a lot.
A lot.
A lot. So that's, 356 days a year, 50...
Yeah, it's about one item a week.
Wow. Wow.
But of course, that's an average. That's an average. I don't know the full details of where the numbers have come from. Are there, stylists buying way more and some people buying way less? I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a big number for sure. When so much of that's going to be hedonic, it's not going to be all utilitarian.
Not all undies or other things.
No.
So capsule wardrobes. So you talk a little bit about capsule wardrobes, and a lot of people present this as the saviour to our frugal fashionista wardrobe. What's your take on capsule wardrobes?
Capsule wardrobes, they feature a lot in the book because I have a lot of thoughts about them. I think that the actual concept of a capsule wardrobe is a great one. A select number of items that you can wear all together. Where I sort of take issue is where the sort of commercialization of a capsule wardrobe has taken hold in the last sort of 8 to 10 years. You only have to hop onto Pinterest and there'll be pin after pin after pin of, these flat lays of the 20 items you need for your capsule wardrobe. And there's invariably a pair of light jeans, a pair of dark jeans, a pair of black jeans, a trench coat, a camel blazer, a Breton striped tee.
I do not have a trench coat or a camel blazer. What's wrong with me?
Well, you just simply have not fallen victim to the commercialization of the capsule wardrobe, because I think that that's where it started to become a problem, because it started to be this sort of excuse for buying neutrals because you were buying them for your capsule wardrobe, when really a capsule wardrobe can be any color, any print, any style, as long as that's all you have. And I talked about this on social media a bit, and it did quite well because a lot of people related to it. I said that if the only time you're engaging with a capsule wardrobe is when you're buying things for your capsule wardrobe, you don't have a capsule wardrobe. The very crux of a capsule wardrobe is that you're consuming less, not consuming more. So if you're obsessing over finding the perfect pair of jeans or the perfect white t-shirt or the perfect blazer for your capsule wardrobe, and you're consuming multiple versions of that thing in the process, or you just have a very large wardrobe full of things that happen to be neutrals, beige, black, white, cream, that doesn't automatically mean you have a capsule wardrobe. You don't have to erase all color to have a capsule wardrobe, and most importantly, you don't have to consume a lot. You don't need to go out there and buy a whole new capsule wardrobe.
We had some technical difficulties during the recording of this podcast, so sadly this is the end of the podcast interview. But before we go, I wanted to share Emma's Frugalista tip. I knew about this because she told me beforehand, and it's a good one. And her tip is, check your donate pile. There's probably something in there you haven't given enough of a chance. And that's a good tip before you give it away. Just see if it's something you actually do really need. So give it a second look, a second life, and maybe even a second purpose. Thank you so much for listening. Keep going, keep growing, and keep finding joy in the small wins. And I would love to see you in the Joyful Frugalista Facebook group or on Instagram.